China has colonized Latin America and the US hasn't even noticed. For decades, America was the only superpower that had its tentacles in Latin America. But when all that American interest got rerouted to the Middle East after 9/11, it left Latin America wide open for China to swoop in to start spreading its influence. So the Chinese Communist Party did exactly that. Today, Latin America looks very Latin from the outside, but underneath the surface, they are de facto owned by the Chinese. Today, Latin America owes billions upon billions of dollars to China. Chinese investors and Chinese businesses are involved in almost every sector of their economy. They're allowing China to sneak in military equipment, train their soldiers, and build up strategic ports along their coasts. And China is using all this leverage they have over Latin America to pressure Latin America into accepting their vision of how the world should work. Like how conveniently, Latin America now seems to always vote in favor of China at the UN, or how most of Latin America also refuses to recognize Taiwan as a sovereign state.
That's how the Chinese move. A 5,000-year-old country moves slow, right? They move slow, and then by the time you realize you're part of the mudslide, it's too late.
China has crept up on America's doorstep, while America was too distracted to even notice. And now it may be too late to stop them.
The People's Republic of China, our long-term strategic competitor, continues its relentless march to expand economic, diplomatic, technological, informational, and military influence in Latin America and the Caribbean, and challenges U.S. influence in all of these domains. Without U.S. leadership, negative PRC influence in this region could soon resemble the self-serving, predatory influence it now holds in Africa.
China is attacking America from all sides. While China takes over Latin America, China is also getting Americans addicted to things like TikTok and other substances, wink wink. But one company is on a mission to help you break your bad habits, and that company is our sponsor Fume. Fume is an innovative award-nominated device that makes breaking bad habits easy. Instead of electronics, Fume is completely natural. Instead of vapor, Fume uses flavored air. And instead of harmful chemicals, Fume uses all natural delicious flavors. That way, instead of breaking your bad habit by going cold turkey, or by replacing it with a different bad habit, Fume lets you just remove the bad from your habit. It's got an adjustable airflow dial for the perfect drag, and it's designed with movable parts and magnets that you can fidget with. This gives your fingers a lot to do, which is great for de-stressing and anxiety. Stopping is something we all put off because it's hard, but switching to Fume is easy, enjoyable, and even fun. Fume's got over 100,000 customers and thousands of success stories, and there is no reason why you can't be one of them. And it starts by picking up Fume's Journey Pack right now. And to get you started, Fume is giving you guys 10% off. Just pause the video and go to tryfume.com/JakeTran by clicking the link below, or scan the QR code on the screen and use code JakeTran to get 10% off your Journey Pack now. That's tryfum.com/JakeTran with code JakeTran for 10% off your order today. Make no mistake, Latin America is extremely important to both the US and China. Latin America is the US's largest supplier of oil. Latin America is an agricultural powerhouse. They export 1/4 of their total production. By contrast, another agricultural superpower, Asia, only exports 6% of its production. From grains to fruits to sugar to coffee, Latin America has it all. Latin America is also filled with a ton of natural resources like copper, iron, tin, lead, zinc, natural gas, while also being the largest source of illegal drugs and immigration. It's also home to the Panama Canal, which is obviously extremely important for the US. Although as individual countries their economies aren't very big, combined Latin America's GDP sits at around $5.5 trillion, placing it in third place right behind China and the US as the third largest economy in the world. And of course, controlling the region puts China right at the doorstep of the US. There is a reason why the Spanish, the Portuguese, and the US have always tried to dominate the region. There's just too much to exploit. But since Latin America is no stranger to colonizers, how on earth did they fall prey to another colonizer, China, this time?
When US cabinet members visit Latin America these days, all they do is talk about China. When Chinese cabinet members visit Latin America, all they do is talk about trade and investment. And well, there's an interesting contrast there. And I suppose you can guess which one is more effective.
To understand how China has been able to conquer Latin America, you have to understand that Latin America welcomed China with open arms. See, before China started trading with Latin America, the only superpower Latin America had to go to for trade and support was the good old US of A. And the US did not provide very good, we'll call it customer service to the Latin Americans. Coups, assassinations, violent overthrows, exploitation, election meddling, and the theft of natural resources. This is how the US has treated Latin America, and they are sick of it. So when China offered Latin America trade, loans, and support without the threat of violence and mafia-style tactics, Latin America happily agreed.
China's coming in and offering better deals. I think the Chinese learned from the mistakes that Russia's economic hitmen and the United States' economic hitmen made. I don't think they're making those mistakes. They're going to make their own set of mistakes, but they're not making those. And so actually President Xi has gone on record as promising, and I've got in front of me right now the 4 points that he's recently made as a promise to any country where they go in. And you're quite correct that they go in and they bring in their own workforces, they bring in their own engineering companies, and they use resources as collateral, just as we did. But he's also promised that 1, we won't interfere in other countries' internal affairs. 2, we won't impose our will on other countries in any way. 3, we won't attach political agendas to assistance programs. And 4, we won't seek selfish political gains through our investment and financial policies. So that's in direct contrast to what the World Bank and the IMF have done.
Like the Chilean ambassador to China said, quote, the US is competing with China for influence in Latin America, but the US has little to offer, end quotes. And it worked. Latin America slowly started getting embedded with the Chinese, especially with trade. Latin American exports to China are mainly soybeans, copper, petroleum, oil, and other raw materials that China needs to drive its industrial developments. And China is eating up all these exports. So now economies like Brazil, Chile, and Peru have become completely dependent on China. These countries need to keep trading with China to survive. They need that Chinese money for infrastructure, social programs, and for the government to run. Which means China now has unimaginable influence over Latin America. Which means no one wants to bite the hand that feeds it. No one wants to push away a country that's bringing them more than $450 billion in trade a year. As Brazil's ambassador to China said, quote, we'd rather not be so dependent on exports to China, but what is the alternative? It's just more profitable to sell to China than anywhere else, end quotes. That's why when the CCP comes knocking and asks these countries to cast UN votes in favor of China's agenda, they happily agreed. When the CCP says Taiwan is rightfully part of China, and any country that does recognize Taiwan as a sovereign state won't be doing business with China, all of Latin America nods in compliance. Quote, in the past 4 years, the Dominican Republic, El Salvador, and Panama have each switched their recognition from Taiwan to China, end quotes. In fact, take a look at this map. The red are countries that have formal relations with China, and the blue are countries that have formal relations with Taiwan only. But trade is just one of the tentacles that China has over Latin America. The next one is even more pernicious. Once trade was established, China went to Latin America and made them an offer. Sign this dotted line and we will make you rich. You'll get these massive infrastructure projects, like a proposed transcontinental railway that can link South America's Atlantic and Pacific coast from Brazil to Chile, or like investing $73 billion into Latin America's raw materials sector, including building refineries and processing plants in countries with significant amounts of coal, copper, natural gas, oil, and uranium. China tells Latin America that these infrastructure projects are gonna skyrocket their economies. That's gonna bring you into the modern era. And the best part is that you don't even have to pay for any of this. We'll help you finance it, our construction companies will build it, and since these projects are gonna make you so much money, you can use the money that it generates to pay off the loan. And look, we know this will work because that's what happened to us. China became the fastest growing economy ever, known as the China Miracle, because we built all this infrastructure. Don't you want your country to be the next miracle? Of course I do, they say. So sign on this dotted line, please. It was an offer Latin America could not refuse. So Latin America loaded up on Chinese loans that went to pay Chinese construction companies to build Chinese infrastructure. Since 2005, Chinese state-owned banks dished out 117 loans throughout Latin America, over $100 billion. In 2021 alone, Chinese state-owned companies, including China Railway Construction, China Communications Construction, and China National Offshore Oil, funded $11.3 billion worth of projects in South American countries. From 2018 to 2020, China invested $16 billion in overseas mining, including investing in South America's Lithium Triangle, the region consisting of parts of Argentina, Bolivia, and Chile. These countries account for 56% of the world's lithium resources, and China has been quietly buying it up, cornering the market for natural resources to make batteries. China also represents the largest investor in Peru's mining sector. controlling 7 of Peru's largest mines, 100% of Peru's iron production, and 25% of their copper output. China also owns 2 of the 5 largest copper mines in Peru. They've infiltrated everything, while becoming the world's largest loan shark in the process. In 2017, China overtook the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund to cement its position as the world's biggest creditor. And now China is using this foothold to slowly build up its military presence in Latin America.
The larger threat, she believes, is China, which is pumping hundreds of billions of dollars into the region to build desperately needed infrastructure like dams, ports, and cell phone networks. But
There's always strings attached.
those strings mean China and the regimes they prop up can now track the activity of their populations. What would that information give them?
It allows them to possibly use health care. For example, if you didn't vote a certain way, then you don't get health care, you don't get food.
And in their most ambitious move yet, China is building 29 new ports in 17 different countries.
Absolutely alarming. I worry about dual use of all of the projects that they are putting in place. Most of these companies from China are state-owned enterprises controlled by the government, and so can easily be converted or transitioned into a military use if necessary.
A conversion like that would mean that China suddenly went from 0 military bases in Latin America to dozens.
See, China is smart. It knows that if it moves actual Chinese military forces into Latin America, the US would never stand for it. It would set off so many alarms. So China has been building up its military power over there much more subtly. From 2009 to 2019, China transferred a total of over $600 million worth of major military hardware to 5 South American countries: Argentina, Bolivia, Ecuador, Peru, and Venezuela. And that's not all. Since 2015, China has trained more Latin American military officers than the United States. And that difference has grown every year since. China is also training Latin American soldiers and policemen as part of their friendly boot camps to bring their militaries closer together. Think about that. America is usually the one sending in special forces units to train foreign militaries to get them on our side. But now China has overtaken the US in that regard in Latin America. And all those airports, ports, and essential infrastructure they've been building across South America, all of that could be switched to become military outposts overnight.
What they're actually doing is they're leasing for long periods of time access to the mineral and the locations that they're building. So they go in, build an airport, build a road, build water, build everything. They take Chinese employees in to give those Chinese employees jobs. They work, they create all this infrastructure, and the local country signs a lease that says the Chinese government can use this for their own purposes. So now China just built 10 military bases all around the globe. They just call them airports, until the time comes that China calls in the favor on their lease and says, hey, we're gonna move military transports and military troops.
Right now, China is holding on to everything that matters in Latin America. China controls the trade, the debt, and the military supplies of countries as little as a few hundred miles away from the US border. But China is not done quite yet. China's next goal with Latin America is to get them to join BRICS. BRICS is the alliance between 5 major global economies: Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They've branded themselves as sort of an anti-G7, and they're actively working to promote their own political and economic interests while undermining the West. One of their major goals that we've covered is that they're planning on creating their own currency to dethrone the dollar. But to do that, they're gonna need to get a lot more countries on board. BRICS needs to expand. So that's why they recently made BRICS membership open for application. And almost instantly, 19 countries applied to join the alliance. Most of the countries that want to join BRICS are being kept a secret. They obviously don't want to get on America's bad side, on the off chance they don't get in. But we do know that Argentina was one of the first countries to apply, which means there's a good chance other Latin American countries are in the mix too. But BRICS is far from the first time another power tried to circumvent the dollar. It's just that the previous times a country tried to do this, America usually invades them to teach them a lesson. And the most absolutely insane story of this is Libya, under Muammar Gaddafi. See, Muammar Gaddafi had turned Libya into somewhat of a socialist paradise. There was free education, free healthcare, free water. Housing was made a human right. And Gaddafi did all of this without taking a single cent from the US or the West. Gaddafi gave the middle finger to the Western colonizers. He showed Africa that it was possible to be successful without the West, that they could break free from their colonizers. Gaddafi was Africa's last hope. But where Gaddafi went too far was when he announced plans for a new gold-backed currency called the gold dinar that Africa could use to cut out the West. And for America, that was just a bridge too far, and it set the war machine in motion. Gaddafi was soon painted as evil, the West incited a civil war in Libya, which set the stage for a NATO invasion of Libya. 8 months later, and the West finally got what they wanted. Gaddafi was dead, the gold dinar was dead, along with Africa's last ounce of hope. But because violent stories like this get demonetized on YouTube, we expose it all in a new private documentary that you can watch right now by clicking the card on the screen. This is one of my favorite videos that we've made so far, and you are gonna love it. And this YouTube membership is where we post one of these documentaries every month that is too controversial to be posted publicly, so that you can learn all the stuff they won't teach you in college for just $5 a month. Click the card on the screen to watch now.